thank you very much for your company. And Andrew Krakouer, thank you so much for coming in. You're living back in Melbourne at the moment. You've got 4 beautiful daughters. Are you in a good place with your life at the present time?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really appreciative to be on the show. So, yeah, I am actually. Yeah, really good spot. Back in Melbourne now, so I've been back here for about 6 months. So, enjoying the opportunities and the Melbourne lifestyle again.
So, Andrew, you're here to obviously tell your story. Take us back to 2006. Everything's going beautifully at Richmond. Then December 2006, the assault happens. Take us back to that night and talk us through it.
Yeah, well, I remember I remember leaving the footy club. You know, we're starting our pre-season break over Chrissy, and going back to Perth like I've done every year, and. Yeah, I remember the night, and then got involved in an incident. Obviously, I've had a bit of history with Justin and his family. So, yeah, unfortunately, I was involved in an incident where I got charged and you know, got incarcerated.
So you were apparently in a real rage that night, which was really out of character for you. What got you in that headspace? Talk us through how you turn into that person.
Oh, it's hard to put a finger on it now. I sort of still look back on it now and sort of see how I got to that spot. So, but it's something certainly I'm not very proud of, and through my actions and through my emotions, I paid a heavy consequence because of that. But you know, I've always held accountability to that. I don't blame anything or anyone because of the situation I got in and the reason why I acted how I did. But yeah, it's something that I'm you know, not happy about, and you know, it's a lesson and a very harsh lesson that I had to learn from.
You and your brother were then arrested and taken back to the police station. Can you talk us through those moments, what it's like being locked up by the police in a jail cell for the first time and suddenly you're not a free man? Well, take us through those moments.
Yeah, it was pretty scary. So the next day we got charged. So officially charged with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. I did, and yeah, and it was just really scary to be able to have to go in there and you do your fingerprints and you know you get questioned and all this kind of stuff. So and you know slowly starting to see that this is reality now. You've done something very bad, and you know the consequence of this could be very harsh. So yeah, it was really scary to go through that.
But getting locked into that cell for that first time with your brother there.
Oh yeah, that was yeah. So once I got found guilty after court, yeah, it was so scary. I remember walking down and getting processed, and then sort of walking to the cell. You know, everything sort of just seemed surreal, you know, because I was thinking about it, you know, 12 months ago I was running around playing footy, and then now I haven't got a future ahead of me. I'm not quite sure what the future holds. So to walk down the halls and looking at the lino on the ground, I didn't really lift my head up until I got to the cell, and I heard a couple of keys jingle, and then all of a sudden this big huge door opens up, and then just straight away my brother and I just got locked into the cell, and I remember putting my hand on the doors, you know, just to push it to see if it could move, and you know that was reality. That was me being incarcerated, and I was incarcerated for my first night.
How lonely is that feeling? Oh,
it's incredibly lonely. My brother was with me, but I remember just even touching the roof of the cell. Like I was laying down, the cell, you know, roof was, you know, a foot away from my face, and it felt like I was claustrophobic and I had no space. But it was incredibly lonely time.
Did you feel guilty at that time? Did you feel scared? What can you remember about the emotions you were going through?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt guilty. You know, I've just been found guilty of a serious charge. I felt guilty for, you know, putting my parents and family through this. Justin's family and you know, his loved ones through that as well. So I was guilty, and I felt really sad and, you know, really upset with my actions as well.
At what moment did you realise, oh golly, what have I done? At what moment did it hit you once you kind of emerged from that rage that you'd done something really bad?
Probably the next day, or even later on that night. And then sort of reports going around that you know, he wasn't in a good state. Probably the next day. So yeah. And
how are you feeling then? I imagine you're feeling physically ill.
Yeah, I was disgusted in my actions. Like, you know, very sorry for what I did and how it happened. But you know, unfortunately, things can't change, and that's a harsh lesson I had to learn from.
Andrew, you're a proud father of 4 beautiful daughters, but back then, when you were in prison, your 2 little ones were quite young, and your childhood sweetheart Barbara. How much pressure did it put on Barbara and the 2 girls, and the fact that, you know, you as a kid saw your dad in jail and you'd go out and visit him, and you've got your 2 little ones that come out and see you once a week. How tough was that to process?
Oh, it's an enormous amount of pressure on brothers. You know, she did such a great job, you know, raising two young girls without a father figure in their lives. So the only time I really saw the girls was when they came out for a visit, and I could only speak to them on the phone. So for Barbara to do what she did, you know, she's an amazing woman, and she did an outstanding job. And you know, with how hard it was for me, you know, I think the hardest thing for me was not being able to be a father and be there for my girls. You know, through my own actions and the consequences of work, my freedom getting taken away from me, but also not being a father. So it hit home, and you know, it struck me really hard with not being able to be there for my daughters.
So your oldest daughter is 19 now.
Yep.
Do they hold it against you, or how do they feel about that experience? I mean, they were very young at the time.
Yeah, they don't say too much. Like, I remember when I got out, all I wanted to do was try to make it up to them. You know, I feel still like I'm trying to make it up to them to this day. You know, for being away from them and putting them through that experience. I'm you know, so disappointed in myself. You know, I've got these sweet, beautiful young girls that look up to me, and I've gone through this, and I've put them through this situation. So, but no, they haven't said anything. They don't hold any grudges towards me. They're beautiful girls. They support me, and you know, they love me very much.
How did you pass the time in prison? What was a typical day like for you?
Oh, I tried to train as much as I could, when I could. So obviously the few facilities were a bit different when you were allowed to have rec time and when you weren't. So
what's training in a prison look like? Because it's probably different to Collingwood's gym.
She's not quite the Holden Centre, no, Kelly. But yeah, there's just a few isometric bars out there you can do, but there's no free weights or anything like that. That's in a maximum security. But when I was in a minimum security, they had like a gym where I was able to, you know, there were free weights and it's like set up like a gym. So I was able to probably train a little bit different.
Can you go for a run? Is there
yeah,
that
you
space?
can go for a run. There's that. So there's an oval there as well. So yeah, there's at rec times, like sort of you get out onto the oval and have a bit of a run as well. Sometimes you could play footy as well. So on the weekends.
And you played for the Warraloo Bombers.
Yeah.
Prison footy.
Yeah.
How tough was that? What was that like? And did you connect with the other prisoners through football?
Yeah, I've been lucky. You know, footy's been a vehicle throughout my whole life to be able to connect with people and be able to give you opportunities and pathways. And the boys obviously knew who I was when I went in there. You know, some talk to you, some don't. But you know, through family connections as well. But you know, with footy through Warraloo, I made a good connection with a lot of boys in there. And you know, there's a couple I still speak to this day.
How do you not get caught up in that cycle? Because you hear all the time of people who are incarcerated then keep getting put back in jail. What point did you make a decision, this is not going to be my life?
Oh, as soon as I went in there. So my first night in there, I didn't want to be in there ever again. So I, unfortunately, you know, people lack the support, I think, narrowly when they're upon their release and sort of with their transition, getting back into society. I was very lucky. I had great support through not only through my family, the Swan Districts Footy Club, you know, and friends to be able to support me with that transition. So I think the biggest thing is support through prisoners once they try to get through that that transition from prison life back into society. Because once they do, if they haven't got that support, unfortunately, they just tend to go back into old habits and old ways where they do maybe re-offend as well, and sort of it's like a vicious cycle. Excuse me. So that's the biggest thing I found with prisoners whilst I was in, boys coming in and out, and that was probably the biggest thing with me. I had that support and that structure and transition to be able to transition from prison life back to society. Obviously,
your family and your daughters was the toughest part, but on your own in prison, what was the toughest part about being inside?
I think just being told what to do and when to do. You know, you go and eat at this time. You can only talk to someone about for 10 minutes, and that's it. You know that, and then you maybe got to try to find another phone. But the queues as long as someone trying to get grand final tickets off Eddie. You know, if Collingwood are in. So it's a fairly big line. But it's I think just your freedom, not having your freedom narrowly. It's you know, I think some people take for granted until it's taken away from you. Like I totally understood how important it was to me until, you know, probably didn't understand how important it was for me until it got taken away from me. Not, like I said, not being able to, you know, go to the shop, jump in the car, do whatever I wanted. You know, when you see your kids at this time, okay, that's enough now. They go home, you go back to your cell. But unfortunately, you know, that's the penalty I had to pay, and that was, you know, the part and parcel of me, you know, committing a crime and having to deal with the consequences of that.
But it wasn't really new prison for you in a sense, because when you were 11, your dad, Jimmy, who's a champion footballer for the North Melbourne Football Club, was jailed. He did nearly 9 years. Can you tell us about that time when you were an 11-year-old kid and you come home and suddenly Dad's not there?
Yeah, You know, that was a pretty scary feeling because I remember, like, usually when kids pull up at a house and you know, they're straight out of the house and they're trying to get into the out of the car into the house as quick as they can, getting a bike, getting a sporting equipment, playing a game or anything like that. But I remember the approach was really slow by my mum and auntie at the time, and yeah, once we walked in, the house was ransacked, and not knowing what was going on at the time, as an 11-year-old kid, was pretty scary. And even more so when I asked Mum where Dad was, and Mum, you know, obviously Mum said he wasn't coming home. So it wasn't probably after, you know, I don't know, for a few days, I can't remember the time frame, until Mum actually told us that Dad was in trouble and he wasn't coming home, and until we saw him in prison. So yeah, that was really scary.
When you were in there, did you make a plan? I'm going to redeem myself, and this is what the plan looks like?
It was hard because week to week I could only really live week to week. To redeem myself and thinking what I was going to do in the future was a bit hard because I actually didn't see that. So I didn't know what the future held for me. The probably only time where I did see a future is when I actually got granted parole, because I knew a date when I was getting out, so I could probably place things around that.